For over 70 years, global security relied on a comforting assumption. Incoming missiles follow predictable, mathematical paths. Exo-atmospheric interceptors rely on Keplerian orbital mechanics. Once a standard ballistic booster burns out, the warhead glides in a rigid, parabolic arc through space. Early warning radars map that arc, allowing defense networks to calculate exactly where the warhead will be minutes into the future. But push an object through the Earth's atmosphere past Mach 5, around 3,800 miles per hour, and those rigid models break down. The vehicle creates massive compressive forces at its leading edges, generating extreme thermal loads that easily surpass 2,000 Kelvin. Military engineers define the true hypersonic regime by the simultaneous presence of extreme physical phenomena. This includes molecular dissociation, where intense heat causes atmospheric gases to literally split apart, or non-equilibrium gas dynamics, where energy disperses unpredictably across the vehicle's hull. Crossing this physical boundary breaks the safety models established during the Cold War. By weaponizing these extreme physics, an attacker compresses the half-hour window for a strategic response into a few frantic minutes. This chart maps the three distinct architectures driving the hypersonic arms race, plotting operational altitude against velocity. At the top, between 40 and 100 kilometers high, are hypersonic glide vehicles. After rocket boost, they separate and coast completely unpowered. Below them sit hypersonic cruise missiles, maintaining a flat, powered trajectory, using scramjets that ram supersonic airflow into their engines. Bridging the gap are aeroballistic hybrid missiles, relying on massive solid-fueled rockets to hit speeds between Mach 5 and Mach 10. Unlike older warheads sailing blindly through space, a hypersonic glide vehicle uses its flat, wedge-like shape to generate aerodynamic lift. It executes a phugoid, or wave-like, trajectory, skipping along the dense layers of the upper atmosphere while ducking underneath the minimum engagement altitude of space interceptors. Because these weapons substitute rigid orbital mathematics for fluid aerodynamic maneuvering, predictive tracking algorithms fail. Mid-course defensive interceptors are effectively blind. With mid-course defenses bypassed, the entire burden of interception shifts to the terminal phase, the final moments as a warhead dives towards its target. Point defense systems like THAAD operate in this window, but they are bound by strict kinematic limits, a maximum operational range of 200 kilometers and a flight ceiling of 150 kilometers. These defending interceptors ally on a single-stage, solid-fueled rocket. They burn fuel rapidly to reach high altitudes, coasting on momentum toward a predictable target. But if an incoming glide vehicle executes aggressive lateral evasions late in its descent, the interceptor lacks the propulsive energy to turn and match the target's new vector. These kinematic limitations create a severe vulnerability in the maritime domain. Chinese anti-access and area denial networks use weapons like the DF-21D and DF-26 to push U.S. carrier strike groups over 4,000 kilometers from shore. Engaging a Mach 10 weapon in the final seconds of its flight path aboard a warship is an act of last resort. Even if a kinetic interceptor hits the target, the massive kinetic energy generated by the collision showers the ship's deck and radars with high-velocity shrapnel. Shifting the defensive burden to the terminal phase leaves multi-billion-dollar assets exposed to kinematic exhaustion, where the attacker simply outmaneuvers the defender's final protection. The aerodynamic forces involved in hypersonic flight create another massive barrier. Extreme heat causes molecular dissociation, which strips electrons from surrounding atoms. This encases the vehicle in a continuous sheath of ionized gas, or plasma, acting as a highly effective electromagnetic barrier that absorbs and scatters radar. This graph plots radio frequency against signal transmission through plasma. Targeting radars are almost entirely blinded, except for a narrow transmission window between 10 and 30 gigahertz. Within this band, signal attenuation drops below 10 decibels, and phase shift distortion remains manageable. Outside of that narrow window, defensive seeker heads lose their lock. To maintain an intercept trajectory during these signal dropouts, next-generation interceptors require vast computing power to rapidly interpolate and predict the weapon's path. Complex artificial intelligence systems, specifically recurrent neural networks and long short-term memory models, are being integrated to fuse this fragmented data. In simulations, these models mitigate 44% of plasma-induced sensor losses and reduce guidance errors by 68%, while the intercepting missile endures crushing 50G lateral accelerations. Legacy radar seekers can no longer maintain a lock through the plasma sheath on their own. The fight to intercept these weapons now relies on these algorithms to maintain a target track where traditional, human-designed sensors fail. The difficulty of defending against these weapons has accelerated a multipolar arms race. In late 2024, Russia deployed the Oreshnik, a road-mobile intermediate-range ballistic missile capable of Mach 10 speeds. This marked the first active combat use of a hypersonic multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle payload. Concurrently, China tested a fractional orbital bombardment system coupled with a hypersonic glide vehicle. By placing the weapon into low Earth orbit using a south polar trajectory, the system approaches the United States via Antarctica, exploiting historical blind spots in a U.S. early warning radar network oriented toward the north. This technological acceleration is happening as traditional arms control collapses. The New START Treaty officially lapsed in 2026, removing numeric limits on deployed strategic forces, precisely as China expands its arsenal toward an estimated 1,000 warheads by 2030. The guardrails that manage nuclear posture have evaporated. By delivering warheads with near-zero warning time, hypersonic systems threaten national command centers and retaliatory forces directly. Recognizing their defenses are obsolete, nuclear-armed states are incentivized to adopt a launch-on-warning posture. When the decision-making window drops to a few minutes, the psychological pressure to shoot first drastically elevates the risk of accidental nuclear escalation. Looking at this chart, you can see the severe economic asymmetry that modern defenders face. Attackers can deploy high volumes of tactical drones for $50,000 or theater ballistic missiles for around $300,000. Intercepting those threats routinely requires Patriot or THAAD missiles that cost anywhere from $3 million to $15 million each. Against mass-produced aerodynamic threats, this cost-exchange ratio mathematically bankrupts the defender and rapidly empties their interceptor stockpiles. To survive, military strategists are pivoting to space. The U.S. Space Development Agency is launching a proliferated constellation of hundreds of networked satellites into low Earth orbit. By gazing directly downward, these sensors detect the intense thermal bloom of a hypersonic vehicle against the Earth's background clutter, bypassing the plasma blackout of terrestrial radars by tracking the target continuously from above. This persistent space-based tracking forms the foundation of an emerging integrated comprehensive layered defeat architecture. Despite the Pentagon reducing hypersonics research funding to $3.9 billion in the 2026 budget, this multi-domain approach aims to neutralize the threat across its entire flight path, rather than waiting for the terminal phase. To solve the magazine depth problem, the defense industry is maturing high-energy lasers and high-power microwave systems. Delivering an effectively limitless number of shots at pennies per engagement, directed energy weapons can physically melt aerodynamic control surfaces mid-flight, destroying the vehicle without expending multi-million-dollar kinetic interceptors. The integration of space-based tracking and directed energy forces a harsh reality on modern defense networks. The alliance that first achieves this technological synthesis will protect its command structures and dictate the pace of modern warfare. Those clinging to traditional kinetic intercepts are mathematically doomed to obsolescence.